Radio 314 on the Red Ice Radio Network.
Greetings. Chris Augustin has been a paranormal, UFO, alien investigator for over 15 years. He's witnessed strange things, some of which we'll discuss in just a moment. Hello, Chris. Welcome to the program. How are you today?
No, I'm doing great. Yourself?
Oh, pretty good. Yeah, I thought it was funny when I searched around your website. I saw the first interview you did was on KNRK. I used to live in Portland, so I know that channel. I was pretty surprised they reached out to you since the subject of ET and UFO is still very woo-woo. So how did that happen?
It was just one of those random, reach outs. They just, I think, found my site or maybe found some of my YouTube content and reached out to me and said, hey, you seem like a pretty knowledgeable and down-to-earth guy, pardon the pun, and, we'd like to just chat about stuff. And, I took the opportunity, so it was good.
Well, that's really cool. So tell us how aliensatruth.com began and what inspired you to start the website.
Well, I'd say I've really always been interested in science fiction as a kid, watching things like Close Encounters of the Third Kind or The X-Files. Growing up, it was a large part of my life. I got into a lot of reading of H.G. Wells and similar material. As I got older and I really got on the internet and watched the movie Independence Day, it was kind of a catalyst for me because I really started to say, you know what, this movie and a lot of the things coming out at the time represented a good view of what I thought could be real. I'm not saying, obviously they're invading like in the movie Independence Day, but the amount of the government cover-ups going on, the amount of evidence that's been collected and suppressed over the years, it really made sense to me. And I started the website just trying to catalog things, more of a hobby than actual research back then. If anything, I was more into a cartoon called Voltron. And I was building that website, and that was like a big part of my life. And this stuff was, secondary. But as the more and more that I learned, the more and more I read, the more documentaries I watched, and then, started to experience things on my own, it really propelled my interests and took over. And I don't run that Voltron site anymore, and I've been doing it really, strong since about 1997.
Yeah, you mentioned a movie. Why do you think Hollywood is so interested in the subject of aliens? It seems like there's an alien movie coming out all the time.
I understand from a pop culture standpoint what people want to see, but I was just reading something yesterday talking about the day the Earth stood still and having potential government hooks to the concept to try to acclimate the public towards the reality of a UFO or ET presence. Yeah. So, and I hate, to reference movies again, but the comedy Paul is a prime example because they actually played off of that and said, what do you think that we were doing? All these movies, we're trying to get people used to the idea. It's funny how so many references to it, you can't help but think there might be just a little shred of truth to all of the fiction that we've got.
Yeah, one has to wonder if Steven Spielberg was told from the top somewhere to make these movies,
I wouldn't doubt that at all.
So let's talk about your own alien and UFO experiences.
All right. Well, as I said, I've been researching this, I think, since the mid-'90s. And the one thing that you just kind of get used to is you're never lucky enough. You never feel like you're actually going to see something on your own. I've got a lot of friends who are MUFON investigators and have never actually seen something for themselves. So when I did witness a large black triangular-shaped object moving very slowly and silently across the sky in southern New Jersey back in 1999, I was truly floored. I never thought I would see something, and here I am, to the point where I was actually dismissing what I was seeing. I was kind of, in my head just saying, yeah, right, you're not seeing something. It's probably some conventional military, whatever. And I just kind of brushed it off. And it wasn't until a few days later where I really started to stop and think about the details of what I had just witnessed. And I was actually training in Air Force Junior ROTC in high school. I was planning on going to the Air Force Academy. So I was actually learning how to be a pilot. I was studying all the, doing all the flight simulators and all the, the courses related to it. So I could identify traditional aircraft navigational lights. And what I saw didn't match any of that. And plus, it was moving way too slowly to be a conventional craft, and it was totally silent. Instead of propellers or engine noise, if anything, I felt like a reverberation or a hum being emitted through the air. And as the object went out of sight, the hum disappeared.
Mm.
And, come to research this many years later, almost everyone who's witnessed a triangular-shaped object has had some type of sound element as well. There will either be a complete lack of sound, or they'll hear or feel this vibration or pulse through the area. So that was just a clue to me that what I had witnessed then was definitely something out of the ordinary. Given it is truly a UFO, it's unidentified. I can't say if it's top secret military black ops type of technology or if it's ET in nature. It was something unexplained.
Yeah, it's interesting. It feels like you almost have to use your intuition to really pick up on, is it human or is it alien? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, from when that happened, I worked with some of the New Jersey MUFON field investigators who told me that triangular-shaped objects were very often seen up in the whole northeastern part of the United States. So they're very common. There's been several waves over the past 20 to 30 years. One in Belgium, I think it was back in the late 80s, early 90s. But, I mean, they've been seen a lot. And in reading some of the declassified military files, I've actually found references of these triangular-shaped objects going back into the 50s and 60s. So some people have said, oh, it's just top secret military. I'm like, well, wait a minute. Right after World War II, people were seeing them too. So
yeah, UFOs in wartime. That's right.
Absolutely.
I wanted to know if you actually had any alien encounters or what else happened after you saw the craft.
Well, the interesting thing about my story, I guess you could call it, is whenever my interest would kind of wane, I would, I have had waves of research. Like I would really get into one topic. I would go full force, full speed ahead, researching it like crazy, and then I'd stop. And I wouldn't really do much for a couple of months, whatever. And all throughout my early years of this, things would happen that would kind of push me back into the world as if, I wasn't meant to step away from the subject matter. So I would have different things happen. So between 99 and 2002, I actually visited Area 51 because I had known the history of the base. And just on a whim, I took a vacation out there by myself. I actually drove up to the base from Las Vegas and climbed up the hill next to the border to see the guard post on the other side. So as I'm up there, if you're not familiar, it's about 140 miles north of Vegas. You're 30 miles from the nearest town in the middle of the desert with no cell phone reception, and I'm by myself with a video camera, a still camera, and a pair of binoculars. And as I'm walking up this hill, I hear a helicopter powering up in the distance. I'm like, well, it's an Air Force base. That's fine. That's to be expected. I kept climbing. As I got close to the border, I turned around and saw the helicopter dive into the valley behind me and come straight at me. So, once again, I am by myself, 30 miles from the nearest town, no cell phone reception. And photography of the area is prohibited. There's signs posted everywhere. But I turned on my video camera, pointed it right at the helicopter. It circled me a few times, flew right over my rental car. I'm sure they were taking pictures, and then flew back to the base. So that didn't deter me. I kept walking and I kept climbing the hill. And I actually, as I got to the top, if you're not familiar with the base, there are no large fences with barbed wires. There's just these little orange spikes every 10 to 15 feet, maybe 2 to 3 feet tall. So I got to the border. I looked each direction. I was out of sight of the security forces. I was out of sight. I was out of camera range. I stepped over the border, looked left and right, and stepped back. So, I mean, I'm not driving 140 miles, in the middle of nowhere and not going to cross into the border. Into the base. So they didn't come and arrest me. I guess they didn't see me, whatever. But I can safely say I've been into Area 51 and lived to tell about it.
What do you think's going on in there? Why are they so secretive about it?
Well, I mean, I've actually looked into the documented history of the base, and I know, a lot of the secret programs that came out of there, like the SR-71, like the stealth fighter, like the U-2 stealth bomber. So they use it because it's so remote to test advanced aircraft. Mm-hmm. Now, with that being said, there have been tons of reports of unconventional aircraft being tested there as well, and there's tons of video of these objects moving in, completely wacky, aerodynamic maneuvers that a normal aircraft could not do. So, if anything, it's probably exotic propulsion and non-conventional aircraft. I'm not saying that it's alien; it's just non-conventional or unconventional. Mm-hmm. But this kind of prefaced the next chapter of my story because a couple weeks after my trip, I was contacted by a doctor, a podiatrist who operated out of North Jersey, who went to Area 51 as well. He was, just marginally interested in the subject matter, took a vacation, said, hey, let's drive up there with his wife. As they drove up to the base on Highway 375, which is the extraterrestrial highway named after the movie Independence Day, he and his wife witnessed a diamond-shaped object flying towards the base being escorted by military fighters. Mm. And this was back in 2001, about a month before 9/11. So he took a picture of it. He got a very clear picture of the jet escorting it, and another passerby witnessed it as well. So 3 witnesses and a couple photos. He reached out to me. He shared the photos with me, and, I emailed back and forth for some time. Fast forward a bit until the middle of 2002, like April, May timeframe, is when the whole next section of these experiences really took place. And I don't know how far you want to get into them, but they involved everything from missing a warp time to an implant in my leg.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to talk about that. I can't pass that one by.
All right. So in February of 2002, I was leaving my girlfriend's house. I'm no longer with her, but it was about 10 o'clock at night, and I was making a left-hand turn. I had the little arrow, you had to wait to make a turn. Mm-hmm. And I was listening to the Queen and the Damned soundtrack. It's a vampire movie that came out back then. And track 10 was about to come on. It was one of my favorite songs on the whole CD. And as the light turned green, I was the only car at the intersection. There was a large, 70s era pickup behind me with the large metal bracket mirrors on the sides. The song starts. I hit the gas. I start turning. Literally the next instant, the song ends. I remember looking at the CD player, and I saw it change over to track 11. I felt groggy. I felt like I'd just come out of a daze. The truck that was behind me was now about 200-300 feet in front of me, and I was still executing the same turn. I was still going the same speed. I hadn't crashed into, the curb or anything, and I was completely disoriented. I immediately felt anxious. I felt afraid. I was cold. I was shaking, and I really didn't know what the hell just happened to me. Wow. So part of my investigator senses, I guess, kicked in, and I said, all right, let me try to rule out some of the obvious here. I tried to catch up to the guy or girl in the truck. I was unable to actually follow them. I lost them in a housing development, so I couldn't ask them if they knew or saw anything out of the ordinary. So I went home, and I just documented everything that had just happened. And I really chalked it up to something strange, because if you're familiar with missing time, it's usually that you go on a 20-minute journey and it takes you an hour and a half, and you can't understand why it took that extra time. Right. So this isn't missing time. This is more like a warp time or time distortion. But looking at the logistics of everything, the song is, I believe it was 3.5 or so minutes long. If 3.5 plus minutes had taken place inside of my car, which would make sense, the song ended, next song came on, the truck should have been long gone. I should have been in a ditch or something, on the side of the road, whatever. I wasn't. I was literally foot still on the gas, still turning, and that truck was only a couple hundred feet in front of me. So what I feel happened is more time took place inside of my vehicle than in the outside world. And people in the outside world were probably oblivious to whatever happened inside the car. Now, looking through other abductions, a lot of people experience things of this nature. Over the past 20 to 30 years, there's been a significant decrease in the quote-unquote missing time events, and many more people are experiencing these warped or time distortion events.
Now, could you recall where you went, or did you do any kind of hypnotic regression to try and pull it back?
I later, 2010, I believe, I went through hypnotic regression, and my wife and I had a shared experience in 2009, and that was really the only event that I was able to get information from. So I was not able to get any of these memories back. I have no idea what happened in that time. So maybe, a future session I might be able to explore a bit more, but at this point I knew nothing about what happened back in February of 2002.
Something else that comes up again and again with alien accounts, I've heard people say, and I've had an experience like this, it feels like something is trying to pull the consciousness out of their body, suck it out of you, basically.
Well, I mean, that resonates directly with me, because later I had an event just like that. But that was a little further. That's in 2008, I think 2007-8 timeframe. That was just a wee bit different. But if I want to just follow along here chronologically, the missing warp time happened in February, and I believe May of the same year, I had another event where I woke up one morning. I had a collection of nights where I'd wake up and find like little spots of blood in the bed, and I couldn't understand where they were coming from. I had a lot of synchronistic type events. I had a lot of dreams that kind of foretold future events, just little things like I think maybe like who was winning the World Cup or who was calling on the phone before it rang, things like that. And one morning I woke up and I found a triangular-shaped bruise on the inside of my lower left leg, pretty much right above my ankle. So once again, I kicked into investigator mode. I tried to figure out what in my room I may have banged into in the middle of the night. I think I had caught myself sleepwalking once or twice as a child, so I figured, maybe I got up in the middle of the night, went to the bathroom or something, and banged my leg. I couldn't find anything that was triangular-shaped. So I just took pictures. I recorded everything that I could from, detail-wise, and I just went on with my life. About 8 days later, this triangular-shaped bruise disappeared. It didn't fade away like a normal bruise. It was literally there one day, gone the next. And in its place were puncture wounds. 4 of them went in a perfectly straight line. So once again, I said, okay, let me do my best to just document everything. I took pictures. I kind of felt around the surface to see if there was any pain or discomfort. There wasn't any, but I could feel something below the skin. So that's when I reached out to the doctor that I had met online after having gone to Area 51, who had the photograph of the diamond-shaped craft. I reached out to him. I gave him a bit of the history of what had been happening, and he recommended that I drive to his office, which was like an hour and a half or so north of where I lived, and he would take a look at everything for me. So I drove up. I had ultrasounds performed on my leg. And he said, in just summarizing, that he had never seen anything like it in his 14-plus years of being a doctor. It looked like something had penetrated my skin, cut my tendon, and placed an object beneath the skin. However, there's no inflammation, there's no irritation. The object is simply sitting in there. He said, not even our most advanced surgical lasers can do that. The human body will react to something foreign being placed there, and mine simply isn't. And he'd never seen that before.
The job for Roger Lear, huh?
Exactly. I actually reached out to him after I got these initial results done. He recommended I had a regular x-ray done, which didn't show anything, but that would only pick up things of like certain metallic, materials, so it may not have shown up on a traditional x-ray. He recommended another type of x-ray, but I have not gotten that done to date.
So did you feel different afterwards? After you saw that it was in you, knew that it was there, did anything change?
Well, well, it's an interesting question because, as I said before, I felt propelled or compelled to research this field, and things would happen to me when I would lose interest. So I absolutely felt at that point, hey, I've got hardcore proof, I've got physical evidence that something happened to me that can't be explained away as wishful thinking, or it's just in my head, or, I read too many abduction stories and now I'm thinking something happened to me. I had proof. So one part of me was like, hey, I've got something here. The other part of me was a little bit of the conspiracy theory, paranoid flavor. Yeah. And I really didn't want to explore it from a medical standpoint because someone might try to take it out and I'd lose the only physical evidence that I had. So it definitely changed me as a person, and it hadn't really prompted me to accept what was happening to me. I still had an element of doubt, and I didn't buy it 100%. So several years went by. Around, I believe it was 2000, 2007, 2008, I was at a party with my now wife. We were engaged at the time, and ironically enough, I was involved in a lot of ghost hunting, and I knew a lot of people who did natural energy healing and Reiki therapy. So at the party, there was a whole bunch of these people because they were, all in different circles. So I asked one of these Reiki healers, who I told nothing about my experiences. I said, "Hey, I've got something weird going on with my leg. Would you mind taking a look?" So he has me sit down on this chair and put my leg up, and he's putting his hands above my leg, and he's like, "Wow, I've never seen anything like this." He said, "There is a hole in my aura. There's a complete void of energy spot in my leg, and he's never seen that before." So I'm like, "Wow, that's interesting." So I told him a bit of the history, and he almost immediately dismissed it and said, "Yeah, I'm really not buying any of this alien stuff. I don't think it has anything to do with this, even if they're real. Maybe you had like a past life injury or something like that." I'm like, "Well, you're entitled to your opinion. Can you put more energy in it to try to figure out, what caused it?" So he starts doing that. He's putting all this energy into it. And as I'm sitting there, I'm sitting up on a bar stool with my feet off the ground. I could feel some type of a force pulling, as you said earlier, like at my consciousness, like being pulled towards the top left side of my body, the top left side of my head. This pulling sensation kept going and going and going, coming in waves. I actually had to hold on to the bottom of the chair to prevent myself from falling out of it. It was that strong of a feeling. He starts freaking out. He calls other people to come into the room. Another healer, they're like, "We got to ground them." Like 2-3 people around me. Another woman comes in who I later talked to, who said she could see people's auras. And she said it literally looked like something was trying to pull the consciousness out of your body.
Yeah, exactly. I wonder how it's being done, if it's technology of some kind. That's my gut feeling when it happens.
It's very possible, given, once again, my research in other abductions. It's believed that these beings have very advanced telepathic abilities. So whether it's done with technology or not is very possible. I think they probably have an innate ability to do it just with their own minds, but just an opinion.
Do you think some of this is kind of like the Gnostic theory of the archons, of the inorganic beings that are psychically intruding, wanting to feed on us? So maybe they're actually wanting to taste your consciousness, if you will?
Well, that's an excellent question. After I was grounded, my wife came in and saw this happening. She freaked out because the healer, was freaked out. So she moved a little bit into the believer column at that point because she saw how real something was, and something was actually happening. But I talked to the woman after the fact that said that she could see, look like my consciousness being pulled out, and I said, "Okay, is it anything to be afraid of? Should I be worried about this?" And she said, "No. If anything, something is looking out for you and protecting you from learning something you're not ready for." So if anything, someone was, doing it for my own good. I was just, not prepared for the situation, and that's why I was scared or perceived it as something to be, afraid of.
I always get a little skeptical because if it's so uncomfortable and it makes you so fearful, how could it be a good thing?
Well, I absolutely understand that point of view, but as I talk through these experiences, I hope to give you just a bit of sense as to why I feel the way that I do. Mm-hmm. So moving on, we bought a house in Philadelphia. We moved in. I really hadn't had any experiences for several years, and we were very separate in regards to beliefs, my wife and I. She's always been into my paranormal research. She loves the ghost hunting and poltergeists and remote viewing and all that stuff. She doesn't want to do anything with aliens, abductions, UFOs, none of that. Mainly because it scares her. She doesn't like what the reality could represent if these things are really coming and taking people and doing all this stuff. So, I would not really talk about it at all with her. So one weekend, I think it was, we went out and saw the movie District 9. And, we got to talking about different things. And the next couple of days, I was flying out to go on a business trip in Ohio, I believe. And I think the night before, or 1 or 2 nights before I left, I had a very intense recollection, I guess you could say. I woke up in the middle of the night, and several nights before that, I kept waking up around 2, 3 in the morning, just felt like there was something off. Something felt different in the house, just didn't feel right. This one night I woke up and I was paralyzed, and I had like an immense recollection, like I had already been through the experience but didn't remember it, and suddenly got all the memories back. So as I was laying there, I distinctly recalled being someplace else. I was laying on a cold metallic surface. I could feel a very familiar female presence to my right, and I could hear small feet quickly walking around whatever I was laying on, like little, like bare feet, like very quickly, walking around. And I just knew that I was someplace else. And it felt incredibly real. It felt like I said, like you download something to your computer. It's like I had downloaded the memory that was already there. I just didn't have access to it yet. So given that my wife was very, not standoffish, but she just didn't want to deal with this stuff at all, I didn't tell her any of that before my trip. I went on my trip. I came back 3-4 days later, and I said, you know what? I need to tell you something. I had this dream experience, whatever, back the other night before I left. And she's like, are you kidding me? I'm like, why? What do you mean? She's like, I had a very intense dream. It felt real. I was, aliens were like invading, and they were trying to take me with them to do things to me. I was resisting. So they were like pouring acid on me, and it burned, but it didn't actually do any damage. And I felt like I wanted to kill myself. I felt like I was moving like up towards something. It was just horrible. And I wasn't alone. There was a very familiar male presence to my left. So she's telling me all this. I was completely shocked. What are the odds that both of us had a very, real, absolutely felt like we had experienced something dream where we were both there. And I mentioned the sides because in bed we sleep opposite of that. In bed, looking towards the foot of the bed, I'm on the right, she's on the left. We both described us being in the opposite position during this experience. Once again, what are the odds of us both describing each other being in the opposite position, having very similar experience?
Sure, it was a real thing. That's why.
I would agree with you. So that prompted me, and talking about synchronicity, I had reported my initial sighting from 99 and my experiences from 02 to MUFON. For whatever reason, no investigator had followed up with me until 2010. Out of nowhere, I received a phone call from the field investigator. Hey, we're following up on cold cases. We'd love to have an interview with you. You've got some really great stuff going a period of several years. We want to talk. And I, at that point, had reached an internal level of acceptance of my own experiences to the point where I no longer needed that physical proof because I had experienced something together. I think my wife represented a good portion of doubt with me and the reality of my experiences. Once we both went through something together and we were filling in each other's stories like that, it proved to me that I wasn't crazy. It wasn't in my head. In addition to the physical evidence that I've got in my body, now we both went through something. And the one person that meant the most to me was no longer doubting it. I accepted it.
Well, contact can also come on different levels. I mean, you could have it on an astral level as well, or on a soul level, a physical level.
Oh, absolutely. I think, whatever we both needed to go through happened at that time. And MUFON contacting me out of the blue, I said, yes, absolutely. They brought me in. I gave the full history of all of the experiences, and they said, we recommend that you go through hypnotic regression if you are willing to. Now, going back to 2009, I did a special with Comcast On Demand where they actually recreated a lot of these experiences. And in their interview process, they asked, do you want to get regressed? And I said, absolutely not. I'd rather not know what these experiences were all about. So at this point in my life, I was now accepting of it, and whatever was revealed, I wasn't afraid anymore. So I went forward with the hypnosis. And if you've never undergone it, or people haven't explained how it feels, it's not like you're completely in a trance and you say bark like a dog, you wake up barking like a dog. It literally feels like a just very relaxed state. and I relived the memories that I could already consciously recall, except like a horse, with a horse and buggy where it has the blinders on, it can only see what's right in front of them. Hypnosis allowed me to pull those blinders back, and I could perceive and feel and see so many more details of my surroundings. And it was through hypnosis that I identified these beings. I knew there were 4 of them. I was not allowed to look at them, but I knew there were 4. I also distinctly recalled seeing a typical gray being in our room standing at the foot of our bed, and I just picked up on the fact that she was female, and I picked up on the fact that she was assigned to me, whatever that means. I don't know, but she was familiar, and I knew she was assigned to me. So I distinctly remember being in 2 different places. I also remember a lot more details about the room that I was in. There was a hallway to the right-hand side where there were 2 or 3 people standing naked with like a glaze in their eyes, just flat expression. Seemed like they were not fully aware of their surroundings, and they were waiting to enter the room that we were in.
So what does this mean? Does this mean aliens are looking out after us? How do you interpret that?
I don't interpret it in any way. I just say that I was abducted. I was on a metal table. Something was being done to me, and then that's all I know. And there were other people waiting to come into the same room to have whatever done to them too.
And why do you think these alien abductions are taking place? I mean, just a gut feeling. What are they after? What do they want?
I know through working with people like David Jacobs and Bud Hopkins, I know a lot of the theories that are out there. I have a gut feeling that whatever they're doing is not meant to harm us. I'm not saying that it's to benefit us either, but I don't have no negative feelings whatsoever of these experiences. And I also don't know what they could be doing. It could be some genetic hybridization program. Who knows? And there's evidence to support that, given the hybrid babies that are shown to people. I've met people at abduction conferences where they have actually met each other on board these crafts and later met in, real life, I guess you could say, met in person, but they already knew these people. So I absolutely, accept that there are hybrid type genetic experimentation being done, but my gut tells me that it's absolutely nothing to worry about. I've always said if they wanted to take over the planet, they would have done it long ago. So I didn't really tell my wife any of this because I knew she would not be open to it. It would be scary. But as I think, matured in my own acceptance of it, we started playing off of each other's abilities. And I say abilities because she's seen paranormal type things in our house since we've lived here. She's seen repeatedly a tall, older white male wearing a black period suit with a tall top hat multiple times in the back room upstairs of our house. And she would never tell me about it because she's like, oh, you're going to think I'm crazy. I'm like, hello, I've been researching this for years. Why would you think I, would say you're crazy? So she would see more and more. She would be open about it, tell me. I then started to see things. I've been investigating ghosts for years that I've never actually witnessed something. Now I've seen balls of light come down our stairs and turn the corner. I've actually, perceived paranormal things. I actually got like a remote viewing type thing where I saw exactly what she did when I was in another floor of the house, and I shouted down, that just happened. She said, how the hell did you know that? I'm like, I don't know, I just saw it in my head. So our abilities, I believe, matured, and the more open communication that we've had, the more acceptance she has had about these events, and she's still not comfortable with it because it is a bit scary for her, but she now accepts that we experienced something together.
And this was happening after the implant, correct? These experiences?
Absolutely.
What if it was like a virtual reality?
I mean, anything is possible, and that's what, dealing with this phenomenon, there's not much that you can really chalk up to, how do you prove if it's real or not, except for things like implants and actual cuts and scrapes and, scoop marks and scars and the things that people have. And that's really only the only real evidence that we have to support these experiences. And to that point, I got even more validation in January of last year. I had to fly to Tulsa, Oklahoma for work. And on the way home, the airport there had those lovely X-ray backscatter machines, in the TSA.
Yeah, I opt out of those. Yeah.
I did not want to go through it. I was leery about it. We don't know what the side effects are, et cetera, et cetera. But I said, you know what? I'm not going to cause any problems. I'm just going through. So I put everything, my phone, keys, everything in my bag, go through. Immediately, the little alarm, whatever, goes off. And I have the TSA person stop me. I turn around and I look at the screen. This was one of the newer machines that didn't actually show you with your clothes, with seeing through your clothes. It showed a digital representation of the human body, and anything that was foreign, and this is metallic or non-metallic, would show up as a little yellow or orange box. And directly on my lower left leg was a bright yellow box, right where my implant was. Now, I didn't have my phone. It was in my bag going through the X-ray machine. I couldn't take a picture of it. So here comes the TSA person, stops me and said, we're going to need to pat you down. Do we have your permission? I'm like, how am I going to say no? Sure. And we need to...
I'd say no. What are you talking about? No, you can't touch me.
Yeah. So they said, okay, we need to pat you down on your legs below your knee. And they started with my left leg. I was wearing khakis with dress socks. I had absolutely nothing else on my body, not even a Band-Aid, nothing that could have set this off except for the object in my leg. So the TSA X-ray backscatter machine picked up on the implant in my leg. So obviously when they patted me down, they didn't find anything and I was free to go. But that was just one more piece of evidence that there is something foreign in my leg where I've never had surgery, and it matches up with these other experiences that I've had.
So at this point, are you okay with it there? Like you kind of want it to be there now?
And the weirdest part about this, and I get asked all the time, why won't you have it removed? Doesn't it bother you that something took you against your will, put something in your body that you don't know what it's doing? Absolutely not. It doesn't bother me at all. If anything, I accept that there are things in this universe that happen that we don't know why, and something could have a bigger purpose for us. So I'm just going to leave it there. It happened for a reason. I'm on this path in life for a reason. So why would I want it removed? I've never had any negative effects of it. I have no negative feelings towards these experiences or the beings that are behind them. The only fear that I've experienced was the fear of the unknown, where it was, me not understanding what was happening. I don't feel that the events themselves were anything of a negative nature.
Now, in some of the alien accounts that you've come across, and we've heard this often, a lot of times when people have some kind of alien contact afterwards, they feel special or they were chosen to do a job. Have you come across that?
Well, I would absolutely, I understand that perspective 100%. And the reason for that is this past September, I drove up to Maine from Philadelphia. That's about 8 hours. Went to what was the Experiencers Speak. It was the first conference of its kind where it was all abductees and contactee type witnesses. I think there was only one quote unquote researcher that did not have an experience of an abduction kind. People like Travis Walton, Kathleen Martin, Peter Robbins. It was a great event. I shared the stage with those people. And the thing that I learned at that conference was that we were all absolutely involved in this for a reason, and we're going through it, we're researching, we're forming support groups because it is necessary. And I've been speaking and working with other abductees since the mid-90s, and the number one thing that I've tried to do is just convey the reality that, yes, unfortunately, you can't stop these events from happening. But if they really meant us harm, like I said before, they would have taken over a long time ago. So I think that I'm absolutely involved for a reason.
Sorry, I just have to say this, but some people already speculate that we have been taken over by them a long time ago. Not only as far as the hybrids, but even like David Icke's work on the reptiles, basically, that they're playing through the elite and masterminding things that are going on this planet. And that's one of the reasons why it's such a mess.
Well, I'd say, that's absolutely possible. I really couldn't prove one way or the other.
Sure.
But what I've come to find is that people like to associate truly evil things as being or coming from an outside source.
Yeah.
Because don't want to accept the fact that people can really be SOBs and people can be that evil. And I have very mixed feelings about his research. David Icke's, I'm really on the fence. He hasn't proven it one way or the other for me. And I think he's a little too far on the conspiracy theorist side, so I tend to dismiss a lot of his research. But that is my personal opinion. Like I said, I cannot prove one way or the other. It's just, for me, his stuff doesn't pass the sniff test. Could I be wrong? Absolutely. For me, it's not enough proof. And everything is like that. There is almost no concrete answer to anything in this field except for abductees and the implants and experiences that we've all shared.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think our government is up to? I mean, with their secret space programs, they're building these crafts that look like UFOs. There's no alien disclosure happening. What do you think's going on?
Well, I think there are multiple agendas. I feel, if anything, post-World War II, it was an element of fear. The United States government could not admit that there was something flying in our skies that was more advanced than they were. They just dropped the bomb. They showed that they were the military superpower of the world. How would it have come across to the world and to the United States people that, hey, guess what? These things can outmaneuver us. Our weapons can't shoot them down. We have absolutely no defense against them, nor do we know who's piloting them. Yeah, that's not something you can tell the average Joe. So what do? They lied about it. They set up different projects, Project Sign, Project Grudge, Project Blue Book, as a smokescreen to make people think, yeah, we're on top of that, we're investigating it, while secretly the real hardcore cases went to a completely different branch that was never shared with the public. So if anything, I believe that the military is not fully aware, but somewhat aware of this ET presence. They are recording the craft, they're tracking their maneuvers, they're reverse engineering the technology to try to match that technology. I don't think that they've gotten it 100%. And one of the biggest, supporters of that are these triangular-shaped craft. Many people, former military, former government have said that these triangular craft are ours. The much smaller ones, the 200-300 foot wide craft are ours. However, the much larger type objects like Phoenix Lights, what have been seen, dwarfing entire cities, those are probably ET in nature, because that technology we have not replicated to date. Mm-hmm. And if you're going about the whole why is it being covered up now, I don't think that element of fear or panic is there anymore. I believe it is now about the energy problem. Never have I seen, and I joke about this all the time, I've never seen a UFO land at a Sunoco station and gas up. I've never seen one landing in the middle of the chopping some trees down and grabbing lumber. So these objects have some exotic type of propulsion. Some believe it to be anti-gravity, some believe it to be interdimensional, whatever. They're not using fossil fuels. So if any world government would admit that yes, these craft exist, and yes, they are piloted by ETs, they would also be admitting that they have technology far superior to ours, they have fuel sources far superior to ours, and the global economy would collapse. Because you could now power everything without that waste. No longer, deforestation. No more raping the planet of oil or natural gas. Whatever they're using would destroy our world economy. So if anything, I feel that the people who are truly pulling the strings of the global economy are deathly afraid that people like me and others in the field will get this information out to the masses, that there could be some type of a mass sighting, whatever. There have been mass sightings and they've been covered up, but the technology would reveal there are energy sources out there and the government would lose control.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and we know that there are humans who have come up with alternative forms of energy, and even that is covered up. So maybe we'll take an alien ship landing on Earth for everyone to see, huh?
Absolutely. I mean, I've been running the Philadelphia UFO meetup group for several years now, and we've got a lot of people who are familiar with the Tesla technology, and a lot of the things, the technologies that were being patented at that time would have changed the world. And what happened? The big industries came in, took over the patents, buried the technology, never allowing it to see the light of day again, because it would have destroyed their profits.
What are some of the other stranger alien accounts you have come across?
It's one of the fields where you really have to pay attention to the person's reaction and their emotions while they're telling the story, because I've heard everything imaginable from, the 10-armed, incredibly beautiful blonde bombshell coming with a guy
Yep.
to miniature humans to complete lack of body, pure light beings or energy beings. So, it's literally anything and everything. One of the connections that I've always not really had a hard time, but where I was typically dismissive, was Bigfoot. I've never really investigated Bigfoot to the level that I have UFOs and alien abductions, but there are some researchers like Stan Gordon in Pennsylvania and some others who have made direct correlations to Bigfoot-like creatures and UFO sightings. I think one happened in the mid-'60s.
Yeah, I've heard about that. Mm-hmm.
Around Lake Erie. I'm reading a book right now, UFOs over Pennsylvania, and this creature attacked people. There were gouges and scratches found in their car. They found tufts of hair that didn't come back matching any species of animals known. So they're absolutely very strange creature, crypto-type stories and encounters that could be linked and have been linked to UFO sightings as well. Literally anything is possible. And as I said before, how can you prove one way or the other, especially if you have no physical trace evidence? If someone says this, blonde bombshell came down, it's like, well, if you had sex with her, don't you think there would have been some skin cells or hair on your body? Yeah, well, I took a shower. Well, why'd you do that? So finding evidence of that is very difficult. But at the same time, you have to gauge the person's believability and their emotions while they're retelling the event. And I'll use an example of my own, just how I described that I knew there were 4 of these beings in the abduction, and I knew I was not allowed to look at them. I recalled an event months after the hypnosis. I was warned by George Filer, Major George Filer, retired. When I did the hypnosis, I would open a door that I could never fully shut again. Other memories may come through on their own, through flashbacks, through dreams, through conscious recollection, what have you. So be prepared. And several months after the hypnosis, I was walking to the bathroom in our house, and I had an instant flashback where I knew they were in the house. And I remembered being afraid and backing up into our bedroom and kind of curling up against the wall, and the memory stopped. But just how I knew there were 4 of them, just how I knew that the one in our room was female and was assigned to me, I knew they were in the house. So I knew right then and there had been another experience that I did not remember.
Of the people who contact you with their stories, how many of them are visited over the course of many years? Or is this kind of a temporary, quick thing? Or does it continue throughout their whole life?
I think the majority of people who have had experiences have gone through them throughout their entire lives. They typically start between 3 and 8 years old, carry on through their teenage years, all the way into adulthood. If anything, I think they do tend to taper off as they get older. But I've had people had the extremes. They didn't have anything their entire lives and had something at 50, 60, and the complete opposite. They had things all throughout childhood, and then it just stopped after they were 18 or so. So, I think it's all of the above. And what you find is the genetic focus. People, one of the most common traits of abductees is O-negative blood type, Native American. There's just a lot of different collections. They'll follow family lines. So if a mother's been taken, her daughter's been taken, her granddaughter's been taken, they'll follow specific family lines. So that just supports the whole genetic aspect of the experiences.
So do you think there are some good aliens looking after us that are going to intervene if things get dirty enough here?
It's a great what if. It's a great concept. Just to reference another sci-fi type thing, the prime directive from Star Trek is you don't intervene. If they're not a spacefaring race, the only time that you step in is when they are encroaching upon lives of others. And if you look at the history of UFO sightings, there is potential evidence that they've been here observing us for thousands of years, maybe manipulating, maybe not. But post-World War II, was when you saw the most significant increase of UFO sightings in the history of mankind. And I believe that's because we developed three very advanced technologies: the atomic weapon, intercontinental ballistic missiles, and advanced radar. And in 1947, all three of those technologies were being tested in the Roswell and New Mexico area of the United States. And just so happened, one of the first majorly documented UFO crashes of our history was over Roswell, New Mexico. I don't think that it's a coincidence that they were observing us while we were testing all three of those technologies.
Yeah.
If anything, I say, when we launched the first nuke, when we started testing those bombs, we sent shockwaves through the galaxy. Somebody, putting on by said, holy crap, they've got the atomic bomb. Let's pay attention. I say it's a great concept that they would step in. I frankly think that through the contact and abduction program, it seems that they are, not interfering, but they are getting involved in people's lives where they need to. There are so many circles of people who have had these experiences. There are certain cultures that have accepted ET life as a norm. It's unfortunately more of the industrialized countries that, just kind of dismiss it away and say it's not real and, propagate that myth mentality about it. Oh, it's just stuff in movies. But yeah, sure, it's absolutely possible. But just like people, I feel that there's absolutely good, bad, and indifference.
Sure.
And some of these beings, like the quote-unquote reptilians, may not have our best interest in mind. But as I've explained to people, I'm not religious. I'm more spiritual. I don't believe in a quote-unquote, old-looking guy with a beard wearing a toga sitting on a cloud idea of God. I feel God is much more an energy force that exists within every living thing. And for there to be good energy, there must be negative energy. There has to be two sides to the coin. So if anything, there are probably good beings, there are probably bad beings, there are probably beings that don't care. That is a kind of summary of my feelings about all of that.
All right, Chris. Well, thank you for your time today.
I definitely enjoyed it and appreciated the opportunity.
And can you please give us your website and any other details as we wrap up?
Sure. My website is aliensthetruth.com. I run the Philadelphia UFO Meetup. We meet on the second Thursday of every month in Philadelphia. And this coming May, I will be speaking at the Aerial Phenomenon UFOCon 2013. And it's going to be a great event. I'm going to be a part of an experiencer panel, and we'll be sharing my experiences, and that's taking place in Maryland.
All right. Thank you. And to everyone listening, stay tuned for the next Radio 314 interview with Kelly Rossano on important astrological transits for this year. Take care.